Hey everybody, today I am going to be reviewing Grease. This film came out in 1978 and it was directed by Randall Kleiser, I think. Doesn't matter. And you might be thinking, why? It's just kind of a random review, but actually I've thought about doing this for a long time, and not because I like the film, but because of how much I hate it. I loathe this film. I have hated it since day one, since the moment I saw it, which I will never forget. And it's just one of those things that's very perplexing to me. There are movies that are very successful in their time, and then they continue to influence generation after generation after generation. And then weirdly, it becomes a part of the culture. And with this film, maybe from a marketing standpoint, I can sort of understand why, but it's really perplexing to me. This is one of the bigger anomalies in terms of why this movie continues to endure in American culture. Obviously, as somebody who grew up loving the genre and wanting to be a part of it as a child, it was always perplexing to people why I had never seen Grease, but I think it just kind of had to do with personal taste. I was more interested in the more kind of traditional musicals, like the Rodgers and Hammerstein musicals, Comden and Green. I like, An American in Paris. I like West Side Story. I like, Astaire, Rogers, RKO musicals, the ones that have a lot of grand spectacle to them. And I just gravitated less towards the more pop kind of rock opera musicals, like Phantom of the Opera, Les Mis, Jesus Christ Superstar, Hairspray, all that. But I just remember being a kid and people just thinking, like, how have you never seen Grease? You have to see it. It's the best musical ever. And I don't know, I remember seeing it. It was on a bus on the way to summer camp in 5th grade. That's not relevant. I don't know why I said that. But anyway, I just remember it only took about 30 seconds into the movie where I just thought to myself, you just know it. Like, you have those moments when you're watching a movie and instantly it's like, we're not going to gel, are we? And it did not alleviate. It got worse and worse and worse as the movie went. And my 10-year-old, 11-year-old self really felt offended by the movie. And I hadn't seen this movie in years, for good reason, but I made myself, of course, for this review. And, I am older now. I'm less worked up about it. This musical really used to get under my skin when I was a kid. Just as a movie, it's very basic. It's very mediocre. There's nothing that stands out about it. It's not well directed or anything like that. But the reason I think I hate it so much is it's just the source material. I blame the source material, because you do have maybe a couple good songs here, 2 or 3 at most. And I think that you could write a perfectly serviceable story to kind of string all those together. But this is not a serviceable story in any way. It's very poorly written. I think it's boring, really. I think it's messy. I think it's offensive. And it's disturbingly awkward in the way that a lot of people make fun of musicals, but I get it this time. The kind of awkward cheeriness and positivity is ironically bone-chilling, like Lynchian characters. I love to ask people who like Grease why they like it, because, clearly it eludes me. But I often hear things like, oh, it reminds me of a time I want to return to even if I wasn't born in that time. Or people that were alive in that time like to return to the nostalgia of it. And that's clearly the key. It's just pandering to the nostalgia demographic, which is a great selling point, particularly in this culture, pandering to kind of like a middle-aged generation in the 1970s who were teens and 20-somethings back in the 1950s. And this movie has that zeitgeisty sort of fluff that captures a very romanticized, very apolitical version of the 1950s. But this is the kind of 1950s that only rich kids remember. And, it's kind of just like a soft serve time capsule. Just like, if a musical like this were made today, it would probably take place in 1984, because we are at that point where we have a generation facing that sort of mortality so they can cling to their childhood, their 1980s nostalgia. And, it just goes in cycles. This is nothing new. Back in the 1970s, you had a resurgence of those 50s sort of movies, zeitgeist movies like An American Graffiti, which similarly offers kind of a surfacey glimpse of the period, and that's fine. I can get into those kinds of movies, but I personally struggle with films where the sole purpose of it just seems to be centered around the idea of remember when. It just made me think of that Sopranos line where Tony's like, remember when is the lowest form of conversation. I don't necessarily believe that, but I think it fits here. But it's just about a bunch of high schoolers, and they're in their final year of high school before they have to say goodbye to their youth. That's really it. But it's the kind of movie where there's a lot of high school drama You know, there's a lot of Jimmy asked Marcia to the dance, but he should have asked Jessica. And that kind of stuff is just not something I've ever been interested in. Even when I was in high school, I avoided all that shit. You know, I think that there are very, very good movies made about the same subject. I think, you know, on a basic level, a lot of people naturally just gravitate towards John Hughes movies when I mention something like that, like a teen type of movie. I think of like Ferris Bueller's Day Off when I think about Grease, just because they have a similar idea of it's like the last hurrah. It's their last moment to kind of have fun, party before it is time to move on with your life. It's time to grow up. And Ferris, that's a movie I've always wanted to review because I think it's a mess of a movie. It is deeply flawed, and yet I like it a lot. There's a lot about it that I think is really powerful. There is a heaviness from it that you actually don't expect. It's not just a movie about teens rebelling against, you know, the adults, the big bad establishment that they will inevitably join. It's kind of an existential crisis going on there, knowing that that's about to happen. There's a lot of that facing of mortality, like Cameron staring at the painting and kind of recognizing that fleeting existence, or the moment where they kind of lean against the window of the skyscraper and they can see all the way down. You know, one of the characters, my favorite character in the film, does self-actualize, and it's a powerful scene, and that kind of stuff keeps me coming back. They move me. And that's just a personal taste thing. It's just something that I like. I like a little bit more meat to my stories like that, and there's just nothing at all reminiscent of that in Grease. You have, I guess, a few characters that are kind of likable, as in maybe kind of intriguing if they had been built in any way. You know, these kinds of movies depend on a big ensemble of people, of, you know, colorful characters. And relationships here, that's a huge cornerstone to the movie. They should build in a certain direction, and yet they do not. And I'm just utterly confused. You need good songs in a musical, and there are a couple here that are very catchy for sure. But placement of the songs are very crucial, and transitions, hopefully, between the dialogue and the actual song should be effortless. And that's very hard to pull off. Even for really great musicals, it's hard. Here, I think you have a lot of songs that just feel very out of place and like they haven't built to anything at all. So therefore, I have no emotional ties to anything that they're singing about, or, you know, I have no ties to them at all. You know, a lot of them, like the main characters, do have their moments. They have their ballads that they get to sing. But again, in order for that to pay off emotionally, there should be some stakes. There should be some reason for me to care. I defy you to find a reason to care about Sandy and Danny at any point in this movie. Talk about one of the most overrated, worst love stories, I think, of all time. Oh my God, I hate it. And so many girls, especially when I was a kid, especially like, you know, teenagers, just like, oh my God, I want like Sandy and Danny. I want that dance they do at the end. And I'm just like, what the hell? Are you serious? I missed the part where they had any connection, anything that made them interesting or relatable. All they do is fight. They reunite at the beginning of the movie. He treats her like shit. She hates him. They separate. They reunite again. He lies to her. She hates him. They separate. They reunite again, and he attempts assault. So naturally, she's upset. They separate. And it's like, wow, okay, that just happened. But people are like, oh no, it's so romantic. It's just a fun, cute, smiley musical. That's what really got me mad, I think. Or it's one of the points that got me really mad in the movie, is when he basically forces himself onto her when they're in the drive-in movie. And naturally, she's upset and runs away. And then they give him this terrible song. It is so bad and forgettable. And, you know, it's like this ballad where we're supposed to feel bad for him. As soon as that song began, I was like, oh, fuck you. That kind of coy, sheepish act, it may work in like Saturday Night Fever for John Travolta, but for this movie, fuck you. And yeah, that's it. I believe they don't have another encounter until that final number, You're the One That I Want. Now, if you take that musical number out of context, like if you've never seen the movie before, and you just watch that number, you know, it's fun. You know, admittedly, it's a very catchy song, and the actors, especially Olivia Newton-John and John Travolta, they really sizzle there. And I had seen the scene way before I saw the movie in its entirety, of course, because it's an iconic scene. But once you put that in context, it makes no sense. Their relationship, again, has meant absolutely nothing. And if anything, it's been, you know, bordering on offensive. And yet somehow we're supposed to be happy for them and feel like this was earned. It does make sense in some ways, but I think more in a realistic, more cynical sense that they were not necessarily going for here. Because, you know, she completely changes her look. You know, she changes her hair and her makeup and, you know, her personality. And I admit, I look at that outfit and I want to wear it. But when you think about it in the context of the story, it is the one time that she finally is able to get his attention, and you're like, wow, he's a keeper. And I know you could argue that, you know, chill out, it's not meant to be taken seriously, you know, it's meant to be a story about flaky, very silly, very melodramatic high school teens. And most of that kind of behavior is senseless and brushed off after 5 minutes, of course. But I think that's just an excuse here not to write compelling characters or have, you know, consistent writing. Again, everything is half-baked, not followed through. And even though you can actually see all of that happening, you can see it all unraveling, they still pretend to conclude everything as if, oh, look, we did it. Everything's perfect. I think the people that have awareness about Grease, you know, they like it, but they kind of recognize it for what it is. I think it's because maybe they get it. You know, they know how, especially at the end of the movie when they say, wait, you know, like, we're graduating. We're never going to see each other again. And then John Travolta's like, that'll never happen. We'll be friends forever. And, you know, they go away in the car. It flies into the air and the chipmunks are singing and all that. And we all know that it's very likely that Danny and Sandy are going to break up tomorrow, and they'll probably never see each other again. And most of these people will never see each other again. All of it is silly, and the thinness is part of the appeal. It is like junk food. It is easily palatable. And yet, you know, I like it to at least have a little bit better structure than this, and I like it to be less insulting to one's intelligence, and I like some pathos at least. This is the end of a big time for a kid. It's a huge transition in one's life, and, you know, I want to feel a sense of that bittersweetness, knowing that you are on the cusp of adulthood, especially while all these celebrations are going on. That it's like a tinge of bitterness, and I feel none of that here. I don't feel like any of the characters are growing or changing. If there are any characters that are intriguing, I did mention at the beginning, I'd say maybe Frenchie. You know, she's quite adorable, but, you know, her character really doesn't go anywhere. And I like the Stockard Channing character. She is a darker character, and obviously, you know, she's the one with the most issues, I think, to work out. But there is a pregnancy subplot. Yes, there is a pregnancy subplot in Grease where her promiscuous ways lead to a pregnancy scare. And it gets out into the school, everybody hears about it, it ruins her reputation. That's a very serious thing. And yeah, she's a bitch of a character, but I admit I sort of felt bad for her in this moment, because that's, you know, something that nobody wants. And it's the one time that, you know, she's forced to be vulnerable when she didn't need to be. And at least there's some risk to that idea, but it's like, you know, like, again, like, tonally, what is this movie going for? It wants to be very silly. It wants to be very vapid, and yet it's going to put in, you know, like these stories of pregnancy, you know, about ruining a girl's reputation like that. It's like, what the hell? And I especially love how it's like, oh, you know, maybe this will be the one plot that's going to go somewhere that is fully realized in the end, where, you know, somebody becomes better because of it. But no, it's just a dead in the water red herring. At the end, she's like, oh, false alarm, I'm not pregnant, yay. And also she's like, you know, this is my chance to turn over a new leaf, be more responsible. And, you know, that goes nowhere either. She's basically the same hoe she always was. I hate this movie. I hate it. I hope to never have to watch it again. I was like, I'll watch it for this review and then I can put it away forever. This obsession we have with nostalgia, you know, I think is okay to a degree, but I also think it gets a little bit out of hand and we've gone way too far with it. But you see that a lot here as well. Just an awkward, uncomfortable movie that doesn't really understand its irony. It's like, yes, you know, it has some humor about itself, and yet it doesn't have enough of that perspective. Grease is a yearbook, and I think that is all it should ever be. It should be something that, you know, you look at maybe one time when it came out and then shelve it forever. Just let it gather dust. And that is my review. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to plug my website. It is deepfocuslens.com. I am an artist and I do commissioned portraits and I sell prints of my work. And if that's something that you're interested in, you can go to the website below. And if you have any questions about a commission or, you know, an art print or something, you can always email me. My email is in the description box below. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to my Patreon supporters. Thank you guys so much for all of your help, all of your support. If you are interested in becoming a patron, the link to support that is below, as well as my social media information. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.